the music that brings us together. It's the music that brings joy untold.
Hi, and welcome to Region 17's Travel in Tune. I'm Diane Porsch, and this is
Flinn, and are you going to go bananas tonight over this fabulous class about the 11 barbershop chords?
Oh my gosh, we are so glad you're here with us today. We are going to learn about the 11 chords in barbershop harmony, how they're stacked, how we use them, why we ring. You are going to go bananas. Okay, Jean, there's a lot to cover here today, but I know that we could start with those major triad, major chords, there's a lot of stuff. And I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 46 years and I still don't get it. So I'm glad I'm here with you today. Where do we start?
Oh, well, it's a piece of cake. We're going to start with a major triad. Did you know that the definition of a chord is 3 or more notes played together at the same time or sung together at the same time? So that's the whole idea of chords. And this is called a triad. And if you know anything about the word tricycle, triangle, 3 different parts. So a major triad only has 3 different letter names. We're going to build everything today on the C chord, with C as the root, just so it makes a little more sense. So if I start on C and I'm going to build a chord, I'm going to go to the 3rd note of the C scale, which is an E, and then I'm going to go up another third, a minor third. I'm going to go up to the 5th note of the scale for G, and when I put that together, it makes a major triad. If you look at your 11 barbershop chords, I want to point out some things on that handout. It says on there, a major triad is made up of a major third plus a minor third. This is one of the 3 biggies. This chord and the dominant 7th chord and the dominant 9th chord are the chords that really make us go bananas, because those are the 3 biggies that give us goosebumps when we ring those chords. And so this is a very important chord when we have our arrangements for a barbershop. It's 3 different letter names, 3 different notes. And so since we sing 4-part harmony, we have to add a 4th note. And so we have to double something. And it says on the paper here that the best thing to do is double the root. That's what happens most of the time. So if I double the root, I have this. That makes a major triad, or sometimes it's called a major chord.
Well, I find that very appealing, Jean.
Ah, very good.
Okay, Jean, I get it. I get that major triad thing. What is next? There has to be a 4th note in a chord because that's what we do. What is it?
It's the barbershop 7th chord. In the real music world, they call that the dominant 7th chord, but we know it as the barbershop 7th chord. And what's very cool about all of the major chords, they start with a major triad. So to build the chord, we're going to do a major triad again. We start with C, and then we have E, and then we have the 5th, G, and now we have an interval of a 7th, and that's why this is called a 7th chord. So you'll notice that there's a flat in front of the 7th, the B there, because when we have a barbershop 7th chord, a dominant 7th chord, you take the 7th of the scale and you lower it a half step. And the flat makes it lower a half step. This is another one of the biggies that makes us go bananas when we hear this being sung.
Okay, so, Jean, my question is, I've never done this before. Why is that B flat a 7th? Can you explain that?
Oh, yes. So if you count up all the lines and spaces, so here's a line, and then there's a space below the staff, and then there's line, space, line, space. If you count like that, and you start the bottom note as 1, so that line is 1, this space is 2, that line is 3, this space is 4, that line is 5, this space is 6, and that line is 7. So the interval, the distance from the bottom note to the top note is an interval of a 7.
Okay, so if we went from C to high C, then that's the octave, right? So that's 8 tones. Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to be sure I understood that.
Oh, that was very good.
Yeah.
So what's cool about the Barbershop 7th, it's another one of the biggies, and that's the one that gives us the goosebumps. And when you are arranging a barbershop song, the best way to do it is to have the bass be on the root of the chord. And we'll learn more about that when we're stacking the chords. So sometimes the bass is on the root of the chord, sometimes the bass is on the 5th of the chord. And those are the two best times to do that. Sometimes, very rarely, it's on the 7th of the chord. If you have something passing that goes, if you have something like, let's see, you know, we've heard that kind of a swipe in a barbershop song. So when we started that, the bass was not on the root or the 5th. The bass started on the 7th, but it passed down to another stronger part. What's so cool about this, why does this ring so much? Because it's all in the overtone series. If you know anything about the overtones, we have a low pitch, and then what we hear is an octave above that, and then a 5th, and then another root, and then a 3rd, and then a 5th, and then that flatted 7th. All of those tones are in the overtone series. And so when everyone sings it in tune and everyone's on the same vowel sound, that's what gives us the goosebumps.
So people sometimes say they don't experience or hear overtones. So it has a lot to do with how this is all set up, especially from the bottom part, I would think, basses in barbershop, so that if we're lifted and singing in tune, everybody else flies through that, and the sounds are amazing, right?
Yes, because if everybody's in tune, the people that are singing the 3rd and the 5th and the flatted 7th are just emphasizing the overtones and giving it a little extra, and that just makes it go, yes, makes me really go bananas.
Bananas. I love that. Well, that's a great explanation, Jean. Thanks a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for 46 years, but I didn't think about all this stuff so much. But Jean, I'm telling you, when somebody comes in and coaches and they say, that's a 9th chord, I'm like lost. What is that about? Because we only sing 4 parts. What is a 9th chord?
Too many notes for us.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that right now. Again, it's built off of the major triad. So when we start, we will have the C, and then we put the 3rd on, which is the E, and then we put the 5th on, which is the G. And this, since this is a dominant one, we're having a flatted 7th, dominant, not dominant, and then we add the 9th. So it has 5 notes.
Now it's a 9th because that top note is more than an octave distance from the C, right?
Yes, if we counted the lines and spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Got it.
So it's, yes. And what's so cool about that, now we have 5 notes. So we have to leave a note out. And so there are 2 different things you can do to leave out a note. You can leave the root off. Okay, if you leave the root off, you have a chord that sounds like this. And that's used sometimes, for passing and stuff.
So when you say passing, you've said it a couple times, but I want to be sure for everybody out there that a passing chord is not something we spend a lot of time on, right?
Right. It's just a transitional chord to go from one biggie chord to the next biggie chord. That's the best way to describe that. And so when I leave the root off, that would be the chord we would have. That's a dominant 9th chord. Or I can leave the fifth out, and that would be. So we do that a lot, yeah. So you have to leave one of the notes out. And so if you're watching on your 11 Barbershop Chords handout, it gives you lots of information about the Barbershop 9th chord. It's a very important card. It's one of the 3 biggies because all of those notes are in the overtone series, just like the dominant 7th is. And that's what gives us the goosebumps.
So
and
the overtone series again is
Yeah.
these tones continue when they're done right, continue to repeat octave and 3rd and 5th.
Yeah.
And that is what is the visceral thing about Barbershop, right?
Yeah, that's what gives us the goosebumps. That's my favorite part about that. So we've talked about the major triad, the Barbershop 7th chord, or the dominant 7th chord, and now the Barbershop 9th chord, the dominant 9th chord. Those are the 3 biggies. Those are the ones that we can ring and it gives us goosebumps, but the songs would be kind of boring if we only had those 3 chords in it and nothing else. So we have to have some other chords to go along with that to make it more interesting.
Oh, now I understand why I don't arrange and why you do, but I can hardly wait for you to get to the next chords. So we're going to do that next. Okay, so this is pretty exciting because so far I get this and I didn't think I ever would. We have talked about the major triad, the Barbershop dominant 7th, and the Barbershop dominant 9th. Is there more? There must be more, Jean.
But wait, there's more. Yes.
What's next?
Now it gets a little bit hairier. Yes. We're going to talk about the major 6th chord. But once again, it starts with the major triad. So we have the C, and we have the 3rd, which is the E, and we have the 5th, which is the G. And then we have the interval of a 6th. So it sounds like this. And so the distance from the bottom note up to the top note is the interval of a 6. If I count the lines and spaces, I get up to 6. And
how many times do we sing? How many times do we use that chord?
Well, it's actually in every song we sing. But if you have an abundance of this kind of a chord, it's not going to score well in our competitions because it clashes with the overtone series. So in the overtones, we have C, E, G, and a B flat, but it doesn't have the A in it. So it kind of clashes a little bit. And so that's why it doesn't give us the goosebumps as much.
So I just want to ask a question. Why is it not in the overtone series? Because of the A? Because it's not stacked on a line?
Yes, it has to do with the fundamentals, the way the frequencies, the sound waves go.
So the distance between each interval should be the same?
Well, it has to do when you hear a C.
Yeah.
We hear all those other notes in there, C, E, G, B flat, D,
Built into it.
It's built into it, but an A is not built into that series.
Got it.
That's like, go figure. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a great chord to have, and it's kind of has a modern flavor,
It does.
Which is cool. And it's usually used when the lead note, when the melody falls on the A. So if the melody is on the A and the implied harmony, the chord symbol says, oh, you need a C chord, this would be one of your options to use a major 6th chord. But this is a closet chord. Oh my gosh.
What did you say that was?
A closet
chord. Okay.
Because it has 2 different ways. And so when we go to we can take the top note and put it on the bottom. And then we have a different kind of chord that we're going to talk about.
That would be on a line. It would be on a line then, right?
That would be, yes. Yeah. And so that makes a different kind of a chord. And we're going to talk about that in a few more slides down the way there. But the major 6 is 4 different notes. And usually the bass is on the root when you're using it as a major 6 chord, when you're voicing the parts. And usually we can tell it's a 6 chord because the G and the A are in neighboring parts. So like maybe the lead would be on the A and maybe the baritone would be on the G. or maybe the lead would be on the G and the tenor would be on the A. They're like right next door to each other. When you put that on the bottom, the G and the A are not right beside each other.
Right.
So it gives it a different kind of a flavor, different kind of a feeling.
Well, you arranger people must go spastic nuts when you see that stuff.
We really go bananas. It makes you crazy.
Go bananas. Bananas. You could slip on a peel on that one for sure. Okay. Oh man. So far I'm with you, Jean.
Oh,
I'm with
good.
you. And if I'm with you, maybe a lot of other people are, but I have a question about this next chord because I know we're setting up for the major seventh. But man alive, I was thinking about this in a whole different way. So could you explain it to me? Because I think I have a couple questions when you're done.
Okay. So once again, it's built on the major triad. So we're going to start with the C again. And we're going to add the third. And then we're going to add the fifth. And then we're going to add the seventh. And of course, I grew up in the 70s. Did you know Color My World?
So did I, but I never thought of it that way.
That's what I always think of when I hear this.
Color My World. I love that.
So that it's a kind of dissonant sounding to us because it clashes with the overtone series. So in the overtone series, we have a B flat that's naturally vibrating when we sing the chord, but this is a B natural, so you really have this clashing against each other. And so in our barbershop ear, our barbershop minds, we think of that as a dissonant chord. But it's necessary sometimes because if the lead is on that seventh note, if the lead is on the B and the implied harmony says, we want you to harmonize this measure with a C chord, then that would be the option to use that. And you never, ever put the seventh and the root close by to each other.
Oh, you wouldn't. So you
Never.
wouldn't have like a baritone lead thing together on something like that.
No, not on this. And so you always, in a major seventh chord, you always put the bass on the root. So the bass would always be on the C.
So if somebody is arranging, I can see that as valuable. If you're not an arranger, but you're looking through your music, the word major says to me that it would be harmonically pleasant. So I'm kind of surprised about this, but I guess the dominant seventh chord is the one that we're used to with that flatted seventh,
Yes.
right? So, but a major, I'm surprised that the major chord would be a dissonant. That's like really amazing to me.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
It hurts my barbershop ear.
Well, maybe that's what it is. I mean, in
Yeah.
other genres of music, maybe that major seventh is like awesome.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the major seventh. I just like the dominant seventh a lot better. But that explains it to me. And I think if it explains it to me, it's going to help some other folks too. So thanks a lot for that, Jean.
You betcha.
Okay, so here's the thing. I sit here going, wow. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I haven't studied this like I should. So I'm so happy that you're here, Jean. We already covered a ninth chord. It was a dominant ninth, right?
Yes.
And man, that's like there were 5 notes in that chord and we had to drop one. And how do you identify it and all this stuff? Now we have a major ninth chord. So what's the difference here? Could you explain that?
The difference is the seventh of the chord. That's what makes it different. So once again, we start with the major triad. We have a C, and then an E, and then the G. And this time we're going to have not a flatted B, just the regular B that's in the key signature. And then the fifth note is the D. So we have...
And so the difference in the ninth is because of the distance from the C to the D?
Yes.
The high D, okay.
Yes, that's the interval of a ninth.
Got it.
Yes. And then usually, again, with this chord, if the melody is on the ninth, that's when you use this chord. Okay.
I can't wait to get to chord stacking because
like,
I think it has to be kind of hard to know where the melody is and what chord to use, but I know you're going to explain that later.
Oh, yes. So this, with the major ninth chord, you always, 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 always leave the seventh out. You don't use the seventh. And so you have a chord that sounds like this. And that's used like when the lead has that D note in the melody, but the harmony they want to use for that measure is a C chord. And that's how you can get by. So it doesn't sound quite as dissonant because the D really is in the overtone series as you go up higher and higher and higher.
Oh my God. I'll tell you what, I'm so glad you know the heck what you're doing. But this kind of makes sense. It's just identifying them. And I'm sure as we get to the chord stacking later, we will understand how to identify them, because if there's 5 notes to pick from, 4 notes to pick from, how do you know?
Yeah, that gets tricky.
Yeah, but you know how to do it. And that's why all of us hire arrangers to do our stuff. But it's really good to know this. So thanks for that info. Okay, so Jean, we had 6 chords built on major triads, right?
Right.
And so what about these minor chords? How many of them are there, and how are they, what composes them?
Yeah. So in our Sweet Adeline world, we use 3 chords that are minor. And it starts off with the minor triad. So once again, triad means 3. Right? So this only has 3 different letter names or 3 different notes. So we're going to build a triad. So we start on the C, and then, but this time we do a minor third. So we lower the third by half a step, and that makes it a minor third. And then we add the 5th to that. Okay, so that's a different sound.
So just to review, the 3rd step in a chord to make it minor is lowered by a half. No matter what key you're in, right?
No matter what chord it is in,
Got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that, I don't know if you've ever sung a song at contest that has lots of minor chords. Sometimes the verse has lots of minor chords, and then it just switches to major key when you get to the chorus or something. Because a minor chord, once again, clashes with the overtone series, because the overtones has a D in it, and if we have an E flat, it clashes.
So my question,
the way it rings.
Can you ring minor chords?
I'm not sure of that answer. My guess is not really. You can make it very resonant, but it can't always really ring it.
All right, so we want people to kind of sidestep a lot of minor chords in contest arrangements, right?
Right. There will be minor chords in the song, and that's okay, as long as you don't have an overabundance of minor chords. Or like, I don't know, we sang a song one time where the whole verse was in a minor key, but then it goes to a major key for the chorus, and so then that was okay, because 3/4 of the song was major. And
well, but see, like, I heard a robin this morning.
Yeah, that's the song I was thinking of. Yeah.
Red, Red Robin. Well, you would, because you were birds, right?
Yeah.
But that's Red, Red Robin starts out in the key of B minor, I think.
Yeah, G. Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but it flips over then to the major, and then the whole rest of the song finishes. But it's a very hard thing to start out in that minor key, because it's hard for us to sing with lift and resonance. I just wanted to check that, because I think sometimes our directors or any of us that are looking for good music, we don't always understand why it's so difficult to sing minor chords. So this minor triad explains some of that right there.
Yes. And so since we only have 3 notes, we have to double something. And so in this example, I doubled the root. But what's cool about the minor triad, if you're looking at your handout on page 2, you can really double any of the notes. You can double the E flat, or you can double the G, or you can double the C. It doesn't, it makes no difference. They're equally as strong. And so how do you know, should I double the E flat here or should I double the C here? Well, if the implied harmony is calling for an E flat chord, the C minor chord is the relative minor of the E flat chord. So it's like, oh no, that's another whole class. That'll really make you go bananas. But it's related because then maybe if it's calling for the harmonization of an E flat chord, then I'm going to use the C minor chord, but I'm going to double the E flat so that it feels more like the E flat chord.
So minor chords, you have more flexibility in what you double.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and we don't do a ton of those. And so my other question then, and I think I'm asking for other people, is when you say implied harmony, that is, you're singing a song that is in a minor mode. So that would, implied harmony would be that you might need a minor chord there. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the implied harmony is like, if you've ever looked at a piece of sheet music, sometimes it has chord symbols above it to tell it what to use. Or if you're playing the guitar or the ukulele or whatever, it has chord symbols. And so that tells us that's the harmony that the composer heard in his head, his or her head, when they were composing that song.
So it would be a nightmare if you were a composer and you heard someone putting major chords, the wrong chords, in a melody that had an implied harmony from minor chords. I get that. I get it. Thank you so much for your help on that. That is awesome. I can't wait.
That would make everybody go bananas if they heard something like that.
I know. Okay, Jean, so we're in this minor thing. Got the minor triad. Think I understand it. And if I do, the world understands it. But I think the next chord we're going to touch on needs a little bit more explanation, and you're the expert. Tell us about that minor sixth.
All right, once again, it's going to be built on the minor triad. So I'm going to start with the root, the C, and then I'm going to do a lowered third, which is a minor third, and then I'm going to add the fifth. And so there's that minor triad again. And then it's called a sixth chord because now I'm going to add the interval of a sixth. So from the bottom note up to there, when you count all the lines and spaces, that's the distance of a sixth, an interval of a sixth. And so that sounds like this. Oh, but this is another one of those crazy chords. You can take that top note, the A, and put it down here at the bottom, and you have a different chord. So you have a whole different note.
Why does that have a Halloween sound?
I don't know. It's just kind of spooky that way, isn't it?
It is. It's cool, though. How many times do we use this chord?
Well, it's used sparingly, like the other one is. But what's really cool about this minor sixth chord is this is used a lot in all the barbershop tags. When you're singing along and you want to end your tag on the tonic chord, whatever key you're in. And so this is one of those chords that is used, weaving it in and out there, and because it's like a tension chord. And then when you get to the major, the last chord, you makes you go, ah. Yeah.
So it creates tension. It helps to create that tension. So the release to, I'm guessing, a major chord would be incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really fun.
Well, that's good to know. So that chord, usually there's somebody neighboring somewhere, though.
Yes.
Would you say, to create the attention that you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay. Very cool. I hope I can identify these things. If I can't, I know I will contact you. But this is really good info. Really good info. All right. So there are 3 minor chords, right, Jean? And we've covered 2 of them already, and we want to cover the third now. And I'm almost beginning to understand this stuff. So can we address that minor 7th?
Yes, perfect. Once again, it's built on a minor triad. So we're going to start with the C, and we're going to go up a minor third to the E flat, and then we go to the 5th, and then we have a minor 7th. So the interval from the bottom note to the top note is the interval of a minor 7th.
So
And so
just
that,
covering, I just want to ask again, I don't want to interrupt you, but that flatted third, that
yeah,
E flat, just to recap, that makes that a minor feel right off the bat because it's a flatted third. Okay, and
yes.
then we have that minor seventh. We covered that before, but this is all stacked down 4 notes. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sounds really cool. Let me see. If we put that together, it sounds like, I know it reminds me of 2 for 2 and 2 for 2. I was thinking that when I hear that chord.
Oh, wow.
So that's used quite a bit when we are harmonizing. And once again, that's considered, all the minor chords are considered secondary chords because that E flat clashes with the overtone series. And so that's why it's considered a secondary chord for our barbershop arrangements. Doesn't mean it's a bad chord to use, but the ones that ring the most chords wins the contest. And the biggies that make it ring is the major triad, the dominant 7th chord, and the dominant 9th chord. So
Well, now that makes sense because I don't want to say a lot of times, but oftentimes the music judge especially might write something about too many secondary harmonic chords, and this would be one of them, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't, because of the overtone series, that E flat knocks that out especially.
Yeah.
Okay, well that helps because I think sometimes when we choose music that is questionable, it depends also on your skill set because a higher level group, a quartet or chorus, might be able to pull off more of these than the rest of us who need these dominant ringing major chords to help us along the way. That makes sense.
That's perfect the way you explained that. That's good.
Yeah.
And so every song is going to have some minor chords in it. You just don't want it to be an overabundance, more so than the big 3. Yeah.
So we don't want the minor chords to become dominant.
Right. Good job. Yeah.
That is like I could go bananas over that.
Yeah.
Totally. Perfect explanation. Thanks. Okay, so now we're down to the last 2 chords, Jean.
Yay!
And from what I understand, they're called symmetrical chords. What the heck does that mean?
Symmetrical means everything is even. Everything's made up of the same distance of an interval. So triad, again, we have an augmented triad. Triad means 3 different letter names, 3 notes in the chord. So we're going to start with the C, and then we're going to do a major third, and we add another major third on top of that. So we're used to hearing, but the 5th is a half step higher. And the reason this is called a symmetrical chord is because it's built on all major thirds. Going from C to E is an interval of a major third. And going from E to G sharp is also an interval.
Okay, so review again. A major triad is built on what?
A root, a major third, and then followed by a minor third.
Followed by a minor third. So this is not a minor third, that last note, and so it's augmented as a result. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so another way I think of it is when we have a regular triad, a major triad, when I think of a major scale, there are no sharps or flats in the C major scale. So when I look at a major triad, I know that it's the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the 5th note of the scale. Right. But then when I raise that one, then that note is not in the major scale. Once again, it clashes with the overtone series because in the overtone series we have G natural, and this chord has a G sharp in it. So it clashes with all the way it vibrates.
So I'm a judge, but I don't judge music, but you have been a judge and you judge music. So when you're hearing someone singing, if you sang a bunch of augmented triads, if you can imagine that, because someone would have to have another note doubled in there, but I mean, it wouldn't be that strong, would it? It would be more of a passing chord?
Right,
okay.
Yes. So here's the thing about an augmented triad. You always, always, always double the root.
Always?
Always, yes.
You always double the root.
Yeah,
Nothing else would work.
Barbershop arrangement.
Okay.
Yes.
But that still doesn't sound like a barbershop chord. Like I would want
Yeah.
that to get out of the way soon.
Exactly. And really, it's not used very often, but it's used if the lead has this wacko note. You know, if the lead has the G sharp, then, and the implied, it's the chord symbol says, let's use the harmonization of a C chord, then you would have to do that and use an augmented.
Okay, so if you went to an era where our barbershop music was really the chords that are in the music, we go back to the early, 1900s, for instance. You don't find the need to do this quite so much, right? The melody lines are different. But
right.
In the contemporary music, we would find more of a need to use this chord. Yeah. But according to our barbershop rules, this would not be strong if we had to use a lot of these. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
In competition.
I'm talking about competition.
Yeah, because and for performances, you want to sing a modern song,
right.
It's fine. Yeah.
Sure. I just wanted, because I know people ask about that. How do I avoid this? No. But in a contest situation when seventh chords and dominant chords and all these things become important for the ring of the chords, we are not wanting to compete with songs that are loaded with augmented triads.
Right.
Is that right?
Okay. Perfect, because it clashes with the overtone series, and so you can't ring those chords. Really.
That makes total, I never thought about it that way. It makes total sense. I hope everybody, man, that makes sense. Oh gosh, thanks. Now that's cool. That's like totally cool. Holy moly, I can't even believe it. We're kind of getting down to the 11th chord, Jean.
Yeah.
And I think it could be a little complicated, but knowing you're going to make it easy. So let's split right away to this diminished 7th chord.
Perfect. Well, this is also a symmetrical chord because the augmented triad was built on all major thirds. The diminished 7th chord is built on all minor thirds. So we start with a C, and then, we'd have an E flat. And then up a minor third from an E flat would be a G flat. And up a minor third from that note, oh my gosh, it's a B double flat. What is a B double flat? Well, double means you just lower it twice. So really, that B double flat is really an A. So I would play C, E flat, G flat, and it's really A.
That's a cool sound, though. It's cool. Yes. I like it.
And it's used a lot as a connecting chord. It's a very cool chord to use going from one major portion to the next. It's a wonderful connecting chord. And sometimes the chord is spelled the wrong way because now we have arrangers that have two different philosophies about that. So I remember I've been in Sweet Airlines, 40 some years too. And the music that we sang when I first joined Sweet Airlines had a lot of misspelled diminished chords because they said, well, these aren't professional singers. They don't know what B double flat means, but they know what an A is. So let's just spell it the wrong way and they'll understand what it is. Well, I come from a different world, I guess, because I feel that as we have progressed through arranging and making our skills better and better, if we want to be recognized as a legitimate music genre in the real music world, then we should spell our chords correctly and just teach our singers that a B double flat means you lower it twice and it's really an A. But I always strive to spell the chords correctly.
Our class today and your offering today is making a lot of sense. And I know a lot of people appreciate that. So this is good to see what it's supposed to be. Thanks.
Oh, cool. I have one more thing to say about the diminished 7th chord. If we made this an A instead of some kind of a B, then the interval from the bottom note to the A would only be the interval of a sixth, and so then I wouldn't be able to call it a seventh chord, which is another reason why I want to spell it correctly, so that I would have the interval of a seventh, from the bottom to the top, a minor. It's because it's 7 lines and spaces apart. That's still considered the interval of a seventh. And what's so cool about this is no matter what note, because it's a symmetrical chord, no matter what note you have on the bottom, it's still going to be minor thirds. Or you could start or yeah,
does it matter if you had that chord and you're arranging, which I'll never do, I would write to you first. But if you were arranging, does it matter what the root is in a chord like this?
No. In fact, this is the only chord that we don't call it by a letter name. All the other chords, when we label the chords, we always label it with a letter name. But when I do our barbershop arrangements, we only have it, we just say diminished. We just write D-I-M.
You don't say 7?
We don't even say 7. We just say D-I-M.
Well, because it's a mess.
Yeah.
No, really, your explanation is so good. And that makes so much sense. And I know on behalf of everybody watching, thank you so much, because that's very helpful. Cool. All right, Jean. So we've got the 11 chords, these big barbershop, awesome, appealing, right chords for barbershop out of the way. But how do we know what they are? And I know that there are tests out there that we can all take for the ACP and the DCP, or just maybe for our own information. How do we know what the chords are when we're looking at an arrangement? Can you help us with that?
Absolutely. I have here some examples of different kinds of chords and how they might be voiced in a barbershop song. And so it's really easy to figure out how to do this if you know the trick. So I'm going to take all of these notes and I'm going to stack them all in one staff. And so I'm going to start with the treble clef. And by the way, when I look at this first measure, how many different note names do we have in there, Di?
I don't know. I'm staring at it and I'm seeing 3. There's a part double. It's a lead and the bass. There's 3 notes in that chord.
Right. So when we already know when there's 3 notes in a chord, it's called a triad.
Right.
So this is going to be some kind of a triad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack them all in one stack. So I'm going to take the lead note, just like it is, and the tenor note.
Yeah.
And then the bass is on a G, but we already have a G, so I'm not going to do it again because we only need it there one time. And then the baritone is on a D. Well, I could put a D right here, but our goal is to line up, stack them up so it's all line, 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 or space, 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 space. So if I use that D, they're not all on the line. But if I move up to the next D, now it's all stacked line, line, line.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so I can also stack it in the bass clef. So I could take the lead note and the tenor note. Oops, come here. And the bass we're not going to use again, and take the D. And now I have it space, 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 because they're stacked in thirds.
Got it. So if you had put that bass note on the lower D, that would not stack in thirds. So the whole key to identifying these chords, right, is
Right.
Can I stack them in thirds? So it creates that chord. And
Yes.
if it's flatted or left alone, it depends on what kind of chord. I get it. So I think we're taking ourselves down a cool road here, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. Thanks for that. That's really cool.
That's great. And now here comes the best part, because now that we have it stacked that way, once it is stacked the right way, the bottom note is always going to be the root of that chord.
Right.
The next note up is going to be the third of that chord, and the next note up is going to be the fifth of the chord. And if we have a fourth note, that'd be the seventh of the chord. And so once you have it stacked like this, the bottom note is going to be the name of the chord.
Okay, so that's a G chord.
That's right. And so that makes it really simple. And we just use a capital G for that chord.
That's
So
it.
that's
So
it.
if I'm playing guitar, I'm strumming along, I can play a G chord pretty easy. That's what's in that chord. And if we're singing that, somebody's going to double that root because there's only 3 notes in that chord. But cool, very cool. Thanks. Okay, so I get all of it. I think everybody else out there does. But Jean, you have this incredible handout. It's called this chord speller sheet or something. Is there a way that we can find this? Oh, look at that. So
That's
where do I find this chord?
okay. So your handout number 4 has all this. If you remember, the notes in this chord were G, B, and D.
Right.
Right? So when I go to this handy dandy chart, I'm going to go down the left-hand column until I get to G. I see G right here. And then I go across this way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read each one until I find a square that says GBD.
You're going bananas. It's the first one.
It's the first one. And so since that's GBD, all I have to do is look up at the top and it tells me it's a major triad. How perfect is that? That makes it easy peasy.
Yeah.
And
That's
so then,
cool.
that is awesome. And then you can go here, if you don't know how to label it, it said it was a major triad. I know I have to just use a capital letter of whatever the root is.
Okay, so major chords are they use a capital letter. Is that a major chord symbol?
Yes.
And a lowercase letter is a minor.
Yes.
Okay, I think that's important too, especially for people who are looking through an arrangement and going, oh my goodness, I see 600 minor chords and 2 major chords here. Maybe that's not good for context.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
Good
so
idea,
that's
good
a
idea.
great handout. That's super. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to the next chord. Okay, Jean, very cool. Like I feel ripe for measure 3 in your handout. Ripe. And I would love to know what we do with the chord in measure 3. How do we know what that is?
Well, we have to stack it. We can stack it in the bass clef or the treble clef. This one we're going to stack in the treble clef. We're going to put the lead note right there. And the tenor note was a B flat. And the baritone is on a G. If I want, I see 2 notes already on the line. So I'm going to try to make all of them stack on the lines. So I can put right here as a G that's on a line. And then there's the bass is on a C. If I put it up here, it's not on the line. But if I put it down here, now it's on the line. So now I have a chord. And so now we have 4 different notes. The bottom note is still the root. The next note up is the 3rd, the next note is the 5th, and the next note up is the 7th because it's an interval of the 7th there. So let's see, first if we want to go back and use our handouts, we have to know that this chord is C, E, G, B flat. So then if I go back to my chart here, C is right here, I'm going to go across this way until I find the one that says C, E, G, B flat. Oh, there it is right there. This chord is a dominant 7th chord. Or the Barbershop 7th. 2 different names like that. So then I can go to my chord symbol chart and look where it says dominant 7th chord. How do I label that? I use the root letter name and then followed by a 7. Wow, so now that I know that, if I go back to here, what should we call this chord, Di?
Oh, that would be a C7. There's no doubt about it.
Perfect.
And even though it's a dominant 7th, from what I understand, we don't have to bother putting the dominant part, the DOM in it. It's a C7 tells us it has 4 parts to it.
Yes.
And the 7th
is lowered a half a step.
Lowered a half step. And the people in our audiences and all of us on the risers find this very appealing.
Yeah.
But that one rings. All of those notes are in the overtone series, right? So
yes,
they ring.
perfect.
So that just stacks and stacks and stacks way beyond what we see on the page, which is so exciting. And we can hardly stand being on Zoom anymore because we want to experience this live.
Yes. So we can all go bananas when we hear those chords ring.
Oh, we're going to go bananas. And we're going to just peel these things out there. Oh my goodness, aren't we good? But that's that C7 chord, and in any key, it stacks this way. Line, 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 space, 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 and the seventh is the lowered, right?
Yes.
Lowered. That's what makes it a dominant seven. So this is so important for all of us to know, because if we don't understand this, we don't know what we're trying to achieve here. So this is cool, and an arranger to explain this is the best thing ever. Okay, whoa, C7. That's the one that gives me chills. I have chills listening to it on the internet. But Jean, in measure 4 and your handout number 2, can you help us a little bit with this one? This looks a little more complicated.
Yes, so I'm going to stack them all in one clef. I have a G for the lead. I have a B for the tenor. Oh, I see the baritone is on an E down here, so it can all be lines. And then I have the bass is on the C. If I put it here, it's all on the lines. So now we have, whoa.
Oh, wait a minute. That is, if you look at on measure 3, that was a dominant 7.
Yeah.
But now you're playing a B natural. Boy, that's different.
It sure is. Oh my gosh. So it's still going to be called some kind of a C chord. Okay, so now we have to go to our chart, and now we have to remember C, E, G, B. So if we go back to our chart, I'm going to go C, and I have to go across until I see C, E, G, B. Oh no, that says B flat. So I got to go C, E, G, B. There it is. What's this one called? A major 7. Because the interval, the 7th, the interval is major instead of a minor 7th. Now, this is where it gets tricky labeling it. Because when I have a major 7th chord, now I have to put the letter name, which would be C, and then I have to put a big capital M, and then the 7. And that tells me.
Than a C7.
Yes.
The major 7 tells you that 7th is not lowered by a half step. It's
yes.
Got it.
So we would call that a C major chord. So that makes it, and it sounds different. Yep. And major 7. Boom.
I got to tell you, that's the part where when you hear a major triad, you go, oh, that's very pleasant. Like that. Da, da, da. Got it. Then you go C major 7, and that sounds dissonant compared to the C dominant 7. And so us barbershop people need to really know the difference between that, because that major doesn't have a major feel when it's a 7, unless it's a C7 or G7 or. This is a good thing to know, though, because I think we could misidentify those chords.
Yes. And it all has to do with the overtones. That's why it sounds funny to us, because that B natural against the B flat in the overtone series.
Sure.
It's like, oh, yeah.
Makes total sense. That is really helpful. Awesome. Awesome. Jean, I'm telling you something. I'm learning more now than I think I have in 46 years of doing this. And I can't thank you enough. And if I'm learning this much, think about all the other people out there. So here's the thing. We have 2 more chords we're going to address today, and they're measure 12 and 13 on your handout. My question is, on behalf of everybody out there, is help us stack them, but can you also explain what the little caret is next to some of the notes? So let's start with measure 12.
Yeah, look at that. You see that little arrow there? I call it a caret. And there's one in each chord somewhere. And so this is taken right from the music theory test. This is the sample test of the DCP and ACP. And what the caret is, they want to know who has that part of the chord. So if you know how we stacked it before, there are 3 different notes. I already stacked it. D, F sharp, A. And now that we stacked it that way, we know the bottom one's the root, the next one's the 3rd, the next one's the 5th. The caret is by the D. So they want to know what note is the lead singing? Is the lead on the root of the chord, or the third of the chord, or the fifth of the chord? And so I would put an R there because the lead is on the root. When I stack it like that, I know that D is the root. Actually, the bass is on the root too, but they were only asking about that note in this chord. So you stack it the same way we were doing in measures 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
And you use that same procedure. So this time the caret's on the baritone note. So I took all the notes and I put them in one staff. And so the baritone's on the B. So when I look up here, oh, this is the root, this is the third, this is the fifth. Ah, the baritone is on the fifth of the chord.
Okay.
And
All
so
right,
this is a great practice sheet to try all those different.
Good. And that's all part of your handout, right?
Yes, it's all in handout number 2.
And if we are able to identify these chords to some degree, if we went into the ACP or DCP testing, we would probably pass with flying banana colors.
Absolutely.
Because it would be so appealing to the people reading our information. So these tests are there, and if we can learn to do this, that's a key to the music theory test.
Absolutely.
Well, that is awesome. I mean, this is so helpful. It's amazing. Like, Jean, I have to tell you something. I can't say I'm overwhelmed. I am just so appreciative of what you know and the joy that you bring to all of us for your willingness to share it. We have one more chord we're going to address today, and it's in measure 5 of your handout. So take a look at that. And I'm asking on behalf of all of us, how do we spell this chord? What is it? What do we do?
Oh my gosh, this is one of those closet chords. It can have 2 different names.
Oh no.
My. So if I take this and I stack it right in the treble clef, there's the lead note, there's the tenor note. The bass is on an F, so if I put it on this F, it'll all be space, space, space. And the baritone's on a C, and if I put it up there, then we have, and that makes a chord. Oh my goodness. And so let's think about what are the names of those. D, F, A, C. If we go back to that chart, right, and we look at D over here because the root is D, and we have to look for D, F, A, C.
Not F sharp, D, F, A. D, F, A, C. Oh, right. I see it. Okay. Yep, that's what I thought it was. Ha-ha.
Yeah, there it is, a minor 7th. When we look up here, it's a minor 7th. Then I can go to my chord symbol chart. How do you label a minor 7th? You use the letter name of the root, and where is it? Oh, here it is down here. And a lowercase m means minor. If you do a capital M, that's major. So you'd have to do the letter name and a lowercase m and a 7. And that's how you label so since this is a D for the root, then this chord is what, Di?
What's this? That is a D minor 7.
Yes, good job. Oh, cool. Now this is going to blow your mind because we can take that same chord and stack it a different way and have a different name.
Uh-oh.
So look out. Here we go. Yeah.
No.
So we can do F, A, C, and I'm going to take the D and put it there. And the interval from the bottom note to the top note is now the interval of a 6th. So now we have some kind of 6th chord.
But it's not, but you're stacking it differently than space, 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 space.
Yeah.
So does the lead line, or what determines the difference?
Well, it has to do if there are 2 neighboring parts that are a step apart between the D and the C, then this might be labeled as a major 6th chord. What is the root of this major 6th chord?
Well,
what's the bottom note?
F.
Yeah, so this is going to be, so this is going to be some kind of an F chord because you always go by the bottom note.
I know that, yeah, but I suppose it has to do with the implied harmony in the song then.
It does, yes.
Ah, okay.
And it has to do with what chord is before this chord and what chord comes after that. And because that sometimes determines it too. But a lot of times it has to do with the implied harmony for the overall feel for that whole measure. What is the harmony that they want to be emphasizing? So that started on F. So we could go down here to F and go F, A, C, D. Where is it? There it is. And it tells us it's a major 6 chord.
Sure.
So then we can go to our handout number 5 about how you label it. And here's a major 6 chord. You label it by doing the capital letter of the root.
Yep.
And just the number 6.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. This is the math. This is the mathematical part of music. Oh my goodness. You know what? If you're at the end of this, we thank you bunches because we are thrilled that you turned into the Region 17 Travel and Tune segment. It is so exciting that you're here. I'm Diane Porsch, and this is...
And I'm Jean Flinn.
And we are so happy that you're here. We hope this was helpful for you. And here's the neat part about this. If you have questions about the handouts or the content of this particular event that we've put online for you, you can get in touch with Jean. Jean, tell us about how to do that.
Absolutely. All you have to do is send me an email at singjean6@gmail.com. Then we also provided other handouts that we really didn't go over, but if you read through that, it'll certainly make sense after watching this entire video.
Well, we are just beside ourselves. We feel ripe for the next life in Sweet Adelines. We're all going to get together again. We're going to sing. We're going to have a great time. And we've learned so much through Zoom and through this opportunity. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all real soon.
Oh my gosh, Di, all we do is talk about bananas. I'm going to go have a banana hunt.
Oh.